Hi, I'm Steven Slate of Slate Digital,
I'm Alex Oana of Slate Digital.
and we are here at Vintage King to talk about the FGX mastering processor. So the FGX was the plugin that started it all. It was the first plugin that Fabrice Gabriel, of course, the amazing designer of our algorithms, it was the first plugin that we collaborated on. And we met in 2007 or something like that.
At AES?
At an AES.
Yep.
And we sat down and we both talked about our distaste for the way the mastering process tends to squash the sound of great mixes.
Right. Just to try to make something loud, it takes the life out of it and takes the bottom end out.
Right. And everyone has had that scenario where you had this great mix and you sent it off to a mastering engineer. And it came back, and yeah, it was louder, maybe it was brighter, but it just didn't have the life. Because for a while, especially, mastering engineers were crushing things, and it wasn't always their fault. I mean, the industry itself was on this verge of making everything louder, and in reaction to that, the audio gets more and more crushed sounding, because the way to make things louder, at least before the FGX, was with look-ahead peak limiters, which attenuate your transients and make them sound softer, and you lose the life and the dynamics of your mix. So Fabrice and I sat down and complained about this same exact thing, and I said, I think my quote was, I said, Fabrice, in 1969, we sent a man to the moon. We put him in a spaceship, and he flew to the moon. And yet in 2007, we can't even make mixes sound louder without crushing the hell out of them. And he said to me, oh, this is a very, very good point. He's French. He said, oh, this is absolutely my point, and I agree with you very, very much. And so we started Slate Digital in reaction to us wanting to build the absolute industry standard loudness process. So what we did is we first explored different loudness processes, and one that we found interesting was saturation. So saturation is actually a form of clipping off the peak of the signal, but you can use different saturation curves to alter the tonality of the clip.
Right, because it sort of it changes the waveform. Does it do anything to the harmonics?
It changes everything, and depending on the shape of the saturation curve, it completely can have a certain effect on the tonality. And what we realized is that certain curves sounded more transparent on upper mid-range peaks, like for instance a snare drum, but that same curve wouldn't sound as transparent on a low-end transient like a kick drum.
Now you talked about clipping?
Well, again, saturation is a form of clipping.
Okay.
I mean, clipping tends to describe a full scale saturation curve, but you can lessen the severity of the curve, and it becomes more like saturation. For instance, if you hit a tape machine very hard, you start to saturate the signal. So what we realized was that certain saturation curves sounded better on certain peaks. So we built an algorithm which analyzes all the peaks in the mix, and depending on what type of transient it foresees, it creates a saturation curve to most transparently absorb the peak. So for instance, when the look ahead in the FGX sees a snare drum peak, it creates a curve shape to saturate that peak to most transparently let through all the upper mid-range energy.
Wow, so when it sees a kick, it analyzes it differently and does something?
It does. When it sees a kick, it produces a different saturation shape that's meant to most transparently let through low-end energy. And we call this process ITP, or Intelligent Transient Preservation.
Cool. And I notice on FGX there's a slider that basically has a default position in the middle,
right?
Which must be like the general setting that tends to sound good on everything. But
sure.
Then as you go higher, it's harder.
It makes the general global characteristics of the curves a little more aggressive. And as you decrease it, it makes it less aggressive. We also have other cool controls in the FGX. We have a transient section, which takes control of the overall transient response of your mix, so you can increase it before going to the gain processor, so you can really preserve your snap and punch from your drums.
So you can limit it to get the level, but then you can get your transients back so it feels alive and dynamic still.
Yeah, but keep in mind though, there's no peak limiting going on in the FGX whatsoever. Right. It's all going through our ITP saturation, which is why you can so transparently make things louder. So
this works unlike like the typical limiter that someone's used to inserting on their stereo bus.
Yeah, absolutely. This does not work like a digital look-ahead peak limiter. It's just using a different topology, a very unique topology to do its gain. Another knob on this is called dynamic dynamic perception.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on in this thing.
Well, you designed it 5 years ago almost.
Yeah, so. It's true. So dynamic perception is a special algorithm which makes the music move more dynamically, even though it's actually post the gain. So after you increase this gain, you put some dynamic perception up, and it makes the music simulate a more movement dynamic sound. So it becomes less fatiguing and sounds more dynamic. And it's just one of those things that helps make this such a fantastic processor for mastering, because no longer do you have to suffer the consequences of the loudness process. You can actually make things louder, keep all the punch, keep all the dynamic impact, and keep all the transparency of this amazing mix that you have.
And as far as inserting something on the stereo bus to give a mix that finished quality, a plug-in effect that I've never found has been really good in the box mixing is a stereo bus compressor that will do the same kinds of things that I'm used to getting from an analog stereo bus compressor. The sort of thing that will bring up some of that low level detail, maybe make a mix sound punchier, and kind of glue it together. And that's in front of the level enhancer.
Yeah, it's called the FG Comp, and it's this amazing mastering compressor. And it's funny because when the FGX first came out, everyone was so infatuated by this new loudness process that at first the FG Comp was kind of overlooked. But then all of a sudden the review magazines kind of came out and they said, and the FG Comp is like my favorite new in-the-box 2-mix compressor. And then we were getting all these emails from big Grammy Award-winning mastering engineers saying, hey, I'm starting to use the FG Comp over all my big outboard compressors, and it's gotten so much praise that we're actually soon going to be coming out with a standalone version of just the compressor.
Oh yeah. And then I've heard of people also using it on stereo buses for drums or vocals or guitars. In fact, I heard of a guy using it as his new favorite vocal compressor.
Right. It's just super transparent. It's tight. It just adds a really great quality to the mix. I love what it does to drums on drum groups. It's really cool. I can't wait till we have it solo so that I can use it even more.
Yeah, cool.
So that's the FGX from Slate Digital.